No, because the embarrassing part of this Claressa Shields situation is not what a lot of people think it is. It is not simply that she lost another BET Sportswoman of the Year race. It is not even just that the internet turned her public reactions into a whole secondary show. The truly embarrassing part is that Claressa Shields, one of the most accomplished fighters ever, keeps ending up in moments where the resume says legend, but the rollout says chaos. That is the disconnect. That is the part people keep feeling even when they cannot fully explain it. You're looking at a woman with an undefeated record, multiple undisputed championships, 2 Olympic gold medals, and now another major title shot against unified middleweight champion Kaye Scott on August 15th in Atlanta. And somehow the conversation keeps getting hijacked by backlash, optics, side narratives, relationship drama, and public blow-ups that make the whole brand feel smaller than the legacy actually is. And that is why I need everybody to lock in right now, because what most people are calling a Claressa Shields problem is actually 2 Claressa Shields stories running at the exact same time. There is Claressa Shields the fighter, the one BET itself described as boxing's greatest and still fighting for her flowers. The one AP covered signing an $8 million multi-fight deal. The one who has done things in women's boxing that literally redefined what is possible. Then there is the other version, the one I'm going to call Crash Out Claressa. The version that keeps stepping into the frame every time the GWAT should be taking a clean victory lap and turning what should be a crown moment into a comment section war. That split is the whole video. Because if we get to the business layer of this story, and trust me, we are absolutely getting there, you're going to see why every public stumble lands harder for her than it lands for other stars. Her issue is not talent. Her issue is that the machine never fully knew how to market her. And now she is trying to outpunch a media ecosystem that rewards spectacle faster than it rewards discipline. And when a fighter starts battling the algorithm as hard as the opponent, the damage does not always show up in the ring first. Sometimes it shows up in the perception. Sometimes it shows up in the room. Sometimes it shows up in the moment that should have belonged only to your greatness. But somehow everybody walks away talking about everything else. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So let's set the table correctly, because this story is bigger than one award, one ban, one headline, or one viral clip. Claressa Shields is not some fringe athlete begging for attention with nothing behind her. She is, by every serious metric, one of the most decorated women ever to put on gloves. BET itself ran a feature ahead of the 2025 awards, calling her the most accomplished woman in boxing history and framing her entire career as a fight not just for belts, but for visibility, respect, and overdue recognition. AP then reported she signed a landmark multi-fight deal worth a minimum of $8 million with Solida Promotions and Win Records, a deal that was pitched as an elevation point not just for Claressa, but for women's boxing as a business. That matters because it tells you how the industry wants to talk about her when things are clean. History maker, barrier breaker, franchise figure, premium attraction. But the tension has always been sitting right there under the surface. Even in celebratory coverage, the subtext around Claressa is that she has had to scream for respect that other stars seem to receive as a matter of routine. BET's own profile emphasized that she has fought under promotion, double standards, lowball deals, and a broader media failure to celebrate black women in combat sports properly. In other words, the frustration is not imagined. The feeling that she has had to demand visibility is rooted in reality. The problem is that once you build your public identity around fighting for acknowledgement, every single moment where the culture does not give you the outcome you want becomes emotionally loaded. It is no longer just I lost an award, or the public saw it differently. It becomes, once again, they are trying to deny me what I earned. And that emotional pressure is exactly where things start getting slippery. Now add the fact that Claressa's name has also been living in hip-hop adjacent spaces because of the Papoose relationship, which BET covered directly when she spoke publicly about it on The Breakfast Club. She described them as being together all the time, talking about kids and family, and made it clear the bond predates the public fallout around Papoose and Remy, while also acknowledging that parts of his personal life still needed to be handled. That may be her business, and publicly speaking it is her right to address it however she wants. But from a branding standpoint, it means the audience engaging with Claressa is no longer just boxing fans or even sports fans. Now you have gossip watchers, hip-hop blogs, stan culture, hate watchers, people who do not care about a jab or a check hook, but absolutely care about optics, relationships, screenshots, and energy. And once those people enter your ecosystem, every moment gets judged twice. Once as sport, once as spectacle. That is why this matters right now. Not because Claressa is suddenly not great, she is great. It matters because she is entering another major fight cycle against Kaye Scott, a 42-year-old unified middleweight champion from Australia with a 5-1-1 record, while still carrying the residue of the BET backlash, the public noise around her relationship, and the fresh stain of an MVP ban tied to the Alycia Baumgardner altercation. So the question is no longer whether Claressa Shields can fight. Please. We are past that. The real question is this. How does somebody with this much hardware keep ending up in narratives where the room feels awkward, the discourse feels messy, and the achievement keeps having to climb over the drama just to be seen? Because the surface evidence here is already loud before we even get to the deeper layers. Start with the award moment that kicked a lot of this conversation back into high gear. After Angel Reese won BET's Sportswoman of the Year in 2025, USA Today reported that Claressa posted, "Still don't know how I didn't win the Sportswoman of the Year for the BET Awards, but congrats to Angel Reese and all the other nominees. I just thought accolades mattered." Then she followed that with another post saying nobody was denying Reese had accolades, but she believed the person with the most accomplishments should have one and added, Team Angel Reese. On paper that sounds like a competitor being competitive. In practice, everybody knew exactly why it blew up. The minute you say, "I just thought accolades mattered," after someone else wins, the internet does not hear nuanced frustration. The internet hears smoke. And once the smoke is in the air, you are no longer controlling how the message lands. Then there is piece of evidence number 2, and this one is important because it shows the pattern did not stop at 2025. BET's official 2026 nominees page lists Claressa Shields again in Sportswoman of the Year, and the winner this time was Aya Wilson. BET also published a follow-up article celebrating Wilson's win and historic run. So now we have a repeat structure. Claressa is acknowledged enough to be in the room, respected enough to be nominated, but not rewarded in the way she very clearly believes her body of work deserves. And whether you agree with her or not is almost secondary. What matters for the brand is that a pattern of public non-coronation keeps colliding with a personality that does not know how to lose those moments quietly. That is combustible. Third piece of evidence. The fight announcement itself. ESPN and the Detroit Free Press both reported that Claressa will move down 3 weight classes from heavyweight to middleweight to challenge Kaye Scott on August 15th at State Farm Arena, live on DAZN. ESPN noted that Shields has not fought at 160 since 2023, that she has boxed her last 4 fights at heavyweight, and that Scott claimed the WBA and WBC middleweight titles after beating Olivia Curry. In clean promotional terms, this should be a legacy angle. Claressa is trying to reclaim middleweight belts and underline her standing across divisions. But the public conversation around the matchup has been mixed because on paper Scott's record is 5-1-1 with no knockouts, and because Claressa's greatness creates a different standard for matchmaking optics than it does for everybody else. When you market yourself as the GWAT, fans do not grade your next move the way they grade an ordinary champion's. They ask whether it feels historic. They ask whether it feels necessary. They ask whether it screams legacy or safe control. Fair or unfair, that is the tax on self-anointment. Fourth piece of evidence, and this is where the optics get genuinely ugly. Yahoo reported that MVP banned Claressa Shields from all of its events until further notice, after an altercation with Alycia Baumgardner during the Ronda Rousey vs. Gina Carano event in Inglewood. The company's statement cited a zero-tolerance policy and said physical altercations outside the ring are unacceptable. Yahoo's write-up said footage appeared to show Shields striking Baumgardner after a heated argument and noted that security had to separate them. Boxing Insider later reported Claressa's response, where she dismissed the ban, said MVP had previously tried to sign her and she declined, and threatened legal action over what she called false statements and defamation. Now pause right there. Do you see how crazy this is? You are one of the greatest fighters on earth, preparing for another championship-level move, and the headline cycle is banned from events until further notice. Even if you believe Claressa's side entirely, that is still a disastrous look. Not because it erases the legacy, but because it fogs the room right when the message should have been razor clean. And the fifth piece of evidence is the one people keep underestimating. Claressa's own visibility story has become part of the product. BET's profile did not just praise her. It centered her ongoing fight for recognition as part of her identity. That means every public loss, every argument about whether she gets enough flowers, every social post about being overlooked, does not land as random noise. It lands as another chapter in the same story, which sounds powerful until you realize it can also trap you. Because if every room becomes another referendum on whether the culture respects you enough, then every room becomes emotionally expensive. Every nomination becomes a test. Every headline becomes a challenge. Every slight becomes a call to action. That is exhausting. And an exhausted brand eventually starts making impatient choices. And oh, do I have more for you, because the surface layer is only the easy part. The really uncomfortable part of the story is what happened once Claressa tried to explain herself, once the people around her started entering the picture, and once you could see the culture split in real time between people defending the résumé and people reacting to the energy. And I already know some of the Claressa defense squad are going to jump up screaming that people just hate confident black women in combat sports. Listen, there is truth inside that broader conversation, absolutely. But that cannot become a magic shield for every single bad optic, every single messy rollout, every single moment where the public hears frustration and reads it as entitlement. In a second, I want to get to the exact clarification she gave about Angel Reese, the way the Papoose situation changes who is watching her, and why the Alycia Baumgardner incident hit differently than a normal rivalry flare-up. Because once those three things connect, the whole picture starts looking a lot less like random bad luck, and a lot more like a brand management failure hiding inside a champion's career. Sports Illustrated gives us the first big cultural clue. After the backlash over the Angel Reese posts, Claressa told Brandon Robinson it wasn't nothing against Angel, called herself a fan of Reese, and said she hated that it looked like she joined an Angel Reese hate train. That matters because it tells you Claressa recognized the public read the moment differently than she intended. But here is the issue. In the attention economy, intent is not king. Impact is. Once the post is live, the internet is not grading your heart. It is grading the screenshot. It is grading the timing. It is grading the emotional temperature. Claressa may have meant my résumé deserves more, but culturally the message landed as, why her and not me? And those are two completely different vibes. Second cultural clue. Papoose is not just a boyfriend in the background. He is a whole cultural portal. BET's report on Claressa addressing the relationship made clear that their bond is serious, emotionally deep, and publicly entangled with the unresolved Remy Ma situation. So now every Claressa appearance, every award show walk, every social post, every caption, every body language clip, instantly gets swallowed by hip-hop commentary logic. People are not just asking, how does the champ look? They are asking, what is the energy between them? What does this mean for Remy? Why does this room feel stiff? Why is the boxing champion now getting broken down like a reality show character? That crossover attention can be useful if you are trying to grow visibility, but it is brutal if your main problem is already that the side stories keep swallowing the athletic story. Third cultural clue. When the MVP ban hit, it did not read like standard fight hype because of the specific ecosystem involved. Alycia Baumgardner is an MVP fighter. MVP has spent years presenting itself as a major platform for women's boxing. Amanda Serrano is there. Jake Paul's promotion has built a whole identity around visibility, leverage, paydays, and viral combat sports packaging. So when Claressa gets banned from that house, until further notice, the story stops feeling like two fighters exchanging words and starts feeling like Claressa has become an uncomfortable fit in a room that claims to be uplifting women's boxing. That is why the headline spread. It was not just fighters' beef. It was one of the sport's biggest names is now publicly in conflict with one of the sport's most aggressive promotional ecosystems. And if you think culture does not notice that, you are not paying attention. Fourth cultural clue. The Layla Ali storyline never fully goes away, and that matters because it shows how Claressa's name circulates between legacy talk and spectacle talk at the same time. BET reported that Layla said she would think about a fight with Claressa for $15 to $20 million and framed any decision as something she would announce on her own time. Meanwhile, Claressa's side has consistently treated big money legacy fights as part of the next chapter. So think about the contrast here. On one side, Claressa is chasing respect at the level of all-time names. On the other side, her day-to-day discourse keeps getting dragged into awards backlash, relationship talk, and public altercations. That split weakens the aura. You cannot spend 1 week trying to place yourself in the museum wing of the sport, and the next week look like the algorithm got custody of your public image. Now let me be fair for a second, because nuance matters if we're going to have the real conversation. A counterargument would be that Claressa is judged more harshly precisely because she is outspoken, black, female, and unwilling to shrink herself. BET's own profile strongly supports that broader context. And yes, I agree there is truth there. There are double standards in combat sports, and there are absolutely people who are more comfortable with dominant women when they speak softly, stay grateful, and let everybody else narrate their greatness for them. Claressa has never been that person. But here is where the counterargument stops, saving every bad move. Structural unfairness can be real, and self-sabotaging optics can also be real. Both things can live in the same house. The world can under-celebrate you, and you can still make it easier for the world to misunderstand you. Those are not contradictions. Those are two problems stacked on top of each other. And that is the gear shift, because once you stop looking at this like simple celebrity mess and start reading it like a business case, everything changes. This is not just about Claressa being frustrated. This is about what happens when a transcendent athlete has to operate in a fractured market that still has not fully solved how to monetize women's boxing at the level her legacy suggests she deserves. AP's report on the $8 million deal is important here because that number is both huge and revealing. Huge because it represents real progress and a real investment. Revealing because it came through a cross-promotional partnership with Salida Promotions and Win Records, which tells you Claressa's commercial path is not the same plug-and-play machine that top male stars often get. It has to be built. It has to be argued for. It has to be sold as event, culture, breakthrough, and statement all at once. Systemic angle number one is this. Claressa's brand has been forced to carry too many jobs. She is not only expected to win, she is expected to prove market value, prove headline value, prove women's boxing deserves infrastructure, prove outspoken black women can be bankable, prove her résumé matters in a culture that often prefers trend over tenure, and prove that she personally can drag more attention to the sport than the sport can naturally generate on its own. That is an insane burden for one athlete. When that happens, personality starts doing promotional labor. Social media starts doing promotional labor. Controversy starts doing promotional labor. And once controversy starts doing any of the marketing, it never stays part-time. It starts asking for a bigger paycheck. That is how champions end up in rooms arguing with ghosts instead of just selling the fight. Systemic angle number two is the media architecture around Claressa. Think about who covers her. Boxing media covers her as greatness, history, pound-for-pound legitimacy. Lifestyle and culture outlets cover her as inspiration, resilience, glamour, and crossover. Hip-hop adjacent blogs cover her through Papoose, Remy Ma fallout, relationship discourse, and internet tension. Social platforms flatten all of that into one feed. So a user who scrolls past Claressa is not receiving a neatly curated legacy narrative. They are receiving a collage. One post says two-time Olympic gold medalist. Another says she felt robbed at BET. Another says she is fighting Kaye Scott. Another says MVP banned her. Another says she is talking about kids and family with Papoose. Another says Laila Ali might come back for millions. That is not a brand arc. That is a browser with 30 tabs open. And people do not reward 30 open tabs with reverence. They reward it with confusion, jokes, and hot takes. Systemic angle number three is that women's boxing still lives in a strange economy where greatness does not automatically lock perception. In men's boxing, the business machine has decades of mythology, promoter muscle, pay-per-view habit, and inherited audience behavior. In women's boxing, even once you become historically great, you are still sometimes negotiating for the basic cultural packaging that tells casual audiences, treat this person like a monument. Claressa is not just fighting opponents. She is fighting for symbolic permanence in a sports culture that has still not standardized how to hand women that kind of aura. BET's profile literally framed her 2025 nomination as overdue validation. Overdue. Think about that word. If validation is overdue, then everything after that gets charged. Every snub feels political. Every loss feels loaded. Every slight feels like another invoice from a system that stayed late on the payment. Now here is where Claressa has to be smarter than the machine. Because the market may be unfair, but once you know that, you cannot keep giving it easy material. You cannot keep letting Crash Out Claressa grab the microphone every time GWAT Claressa should be standing in the light. You cannot spend years arguing that your greatness is not up for debate, and then enter public moments in ways that invite debates about your composure, your priorities, or your emotional discipline. That is not how you beat a hostile media ecosystem. That is how you feed it. The room is already looking for a shortcut. Do not hand them one. And let me tell you something else the casual viewer misses. The matchup with Kaye Scott is not only a fight. It is a branding test. ESPN framed it as a legacy move and a chance to reclaim middleweight hardware. That is the official story. But because Scott is 42 and just 5'11", the unofficial story becomes, how dominant does Claressa look, and how convincing does this feel? Those are different questions. One is technical. One is theatrical. One belongs to boxing. One belongs to the market. Claressa needs to win both. Because if she only wins the fight, but loses the feeling again, we will be right back here, having the same conversation with a different timestamp. This is why I keep saying the deepest issue is not that Claressa is embarrassing herself in some cartoon way. The deeper issue is that her public strategy is constantly putting her in situations where small awkward moments get amplified into big symbolic moments. That is a systems problem, a management problem, a narrative discipline problem, a one person doing five people's jobs problem. And if nobody around her can separate the legitimate frustration from the self-defeating delivery, the cycle repeats forever. Great fighter. Messy moment. Defend yourself online. Get misunderstood. Double down. Legacy conversation interrupted. Repeat. So here is the truth bomb, and I think this is the part a lot of people are scared to say plainly. Claressa Shields is not losing the respect battle because she lacks greatness. She is losing it in key public moments because she keeps trying to force recognition through confrontation instead of letting structure, timing, and discipline do the talking. That is the real embarrassment. Not her resume, not her talent. The fact that somebody this accomplished still feels like she has to wrestle every room into submission. Because once a legend starts chasing acknowledgement out loud in every setting, the culture stops receiving the legend and starts analyzing the chase. Look at the chain. BET said she was boxing's greatest and still fighting for her flowers. USA Today documented her posting that she thought accolades mattered after Angel Reese won. Sports Illustrated then had to cover her clarifying that she was not hating on Angel. BET's 2026 nominee page shows she was back in the same category and still did not win, this time to Aya Wilson. Yahoo reported an MVP ban after the Baumgardner altercation. Boxing Insider reported Claressa firing back and threatening legal action. ESPN and Free Press reported another major title challenge against Kaye Scott. That is not one clean narrative. That is a champion repeatedly having the athletic story interrupted by the emotional story. And what makes it worse is that the culture loves a contradiction more than it loves a resume. The minute people sense that the public energy is more volatile than the professional image, they lean into the volatility. They stop asking, how do we preserve this legacy, and start asking, what is she mad about now? That is the trap. That is the narrative prison. The longer Claressa fights inside it, the more her actual accomplishments risk becoming background music to a spectacle she never fully intended to create. And yes, some of that is unfair. But unfair does not mean invisible. It still counts. It still shapes perception. It still decides what casual fans think when they hear your name. The payoff is harsh but simple. Claressa's public issue is not a talent deficit. It is an aura leak. Every time the discourse gets pulled toward side conflict, the aura drains. Every time she explains, clarifies, reacts, or fires back, some of the monument energy gets traded for timeline energy. One person looks like a legacy figure. The other looks like they are still trying to prove they belong in the museum. But Claressa already belongs in the museum. That is what makes this so frustrating. The culture is watching an all-time fighter behave like the verdict is still pending. And yet the resolution is not hopeless, because the hero in this story is still right there. Claressa Shields, the actual fighter, is still winning. She is still undefeated. She still landed the multi-fight money. She still drew real crowds, with AP noting a 15,366 announced attendance, figure tied to the Detroit momentum behind her deal. She is still important enough that every outlet keeps writing about her. She is still accomplished enough that BET has to keep putting her in the nominee field. She is still ambitious enough to move back down in weight and chase more belts. That part is real, and I do not want that lost in the comedy of the moment. So the path forward is actually obvious. Let the fists talk longer than the feed. Let the August 15th fight be about the technical achievement of moving down, reclaiming middleweight ground, and proving that a 5-division world champion can still make the sport look easy. Stop trying to win every comment section. Stop trying to litigate every slight in real time. Stop giving Crash Out Claressa the front seat, when GWAT Claressa should be the only person on camera. That is the fix. Not because it is polite, because it is strategic. Because legends are not required to answer every room. Sometimes the coldest flex is to let the room keep talking while you keep stacking evidence. One person keeps getting baited into proving a point. The other person should be too busy proving history. That is the entire contrast. While the noise version of Claressa is arguing with the atmosphere, the disciplined version is still the woman who changed what women's boxing can look like as business, legacy, and event. The right person is still winning if the right person takes the wheel. And if you really support her, that is what you should want. Not more mess to defend. More clarity to celebrate. This is only the start, though, because two things are coming that will tell us everything. First is the Kaye Scott fight itself. Not just whether Claressa wins, but how the public reads the performance, how the promotion frames it, and whether the post-fight conversation finally stays on boxing instead of wandering into all the side alleys again. Second is the next major legacy fork, because the Laila Ali chatter is still floating. The women's boxing promotional wars are still very real, and the Alycia Baumgardner tension is obviously not something the culture has forgotten. So the next few months are not just about another belt. They are about whether Claressa can restore monument energy to a brand that has spent too much time feeling like it is in constant argument with the room. And if that is the version of this story you want tracked the right way, you already know what to do. Stay locked in here, because I'm going to keep separating the resume from the noise, the real stakes from the fake outrage, and the legacy conversation from the circus conversation. Because the next video needs to be the one that asks the question nobody in the mainstream sports talk space seems ready to ask directly. If Claressa beats Kaye Scott clean, decisively, and still cannot hold the culture's focus without drama, what does that reveal about the business model around women's boxing itself? That is not just another reaction. That is the whole machine exposed. And when we get there, we are going to connect the fight result, the promotional packaging, and the visibility economy in one shot. You do not want to miss that one.